That is the end of the press conference we saw between Secretary of State Rex Tillerson there, speaking after his 2-hour meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He was just talking to the media there. You see him shaking hands with the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. Tillerson saying U.S.-Russian relations are pretty much at a low point, but there are some areas we have in common. He called the Russians out on a number of things. On Syria, he called the Russians out on the Ukraine, and he called the Russians out on cyber attacks on us in our election season. I'm Trish Regan. Welcome, everyone, to the Intelligence Report. I am joined right now on set for analysis of what we just saw by General Jack Keane. Good to have you here on such an important day. First of all, this was a big deal because Rex Tillerson was there alongside the Russian foreign minister. He met earlier with Putin, despite all the reports that we had heard that Putin wasn't going to see him. What's that tell you?
Well, I thought he would see him, even though he wanted to dramatize it a little bit. You can't have the new Secretary of State in Moscow and not be seen by the head of state. It just doesn't make any sense. So he did see him. But listen, I'll tell you what, if there's anybody out there that doubts the capability of this Secretary of State, get rid of that thought. Because we have a strong Secretary of State who's very matter-of-fact, very business-like, gone to the phony platitudes that we used to have dealing with this guy Lavrov, who's a bold-faced liar. And you could see him squirming in that chair today as Tillerson was talking to him about where they are. What's happened here, there's absolutely nothing substantive coming out of here in terms of agreements or concessions other than the fact that they want to improve the relationship. That is the singular agreement that they have, which indicates how bad this relationship truly is. But it's a good thing that we're talking to each other.
But in a way, like, how could it be that bad? You know, the Russians should be thankful that they were able to do as much as they did under President Obama. In other words, he let them get away with a whole lot. We wouldn't be dealing with all the messes we're dealing with if somebody had actually stuck up for us and Syria and the rest of the world, Ukraine included, in this whole process. So from the Russians' perspective, why do they feel like they're at such a low?
Well, because they wanted to keep playing that winning hand, and they're not going to be able to do it. You're absolutely right. We're not in the mess in Syria, Iraq, Libya, and the problems we've had in Egypt. It was not for Obama's policies. I think the thing that's happened here, and it began to happen last week, you know, we never knew for sure where the Trump administration was going to move in terms of America's global leadership, the historical, traditional role that we've played to help stabilize the world. Were they going to pull back and be more isolationist? A lot of debate about that. That's over. The fact is, America is reassuring our allies in the Far East, in Europe, and in the Middle East that we are going to exercise a global leadership role, and we're going to have their back. We're going to protect America's interest, and we're going to protect our allies' interest. That is a fact. That is no longer a debatable subject. And you could see it right here in this meeting in Moscow with Secretary Tillerson going right after him for Assad and the kind of barbarian that he is, that he wants him out of there, going after him on the Ukraine. He said that the Minsk agreements, for our audience who may not be familiar with it, a peace accord that we had that would involve the Russians having to pull their forces out, the separate forces out, have a ceasefire. They've never agreed to it. In fact, they agreed to it on paper. And Tillerson said to them, unless you abide by the Minsk Accord and pull your separate forces out of Ukraine, we will not be able to improve our relationship. Now, that's a stunning comment. And then he went right after him for the cyber attack and meddling with the U.S. election.
Wow. So in other words, he put all his cards on the table. He's a Texas oil man. He's very straightforward. He's blunt. He's saying this is what we expect. This is where we stand. And you could see the foreign minister feeling uncomfortable. He did defend Russia in the cyber attacks. He said, look, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. Our intelligence community says otherwise. But it's a new day, a new age. And where do you see our relationship with going? I just got about a minute on the clock, General.
Well, I think there's opportunities here for this relationship to improve. But Russia is in a very good place in Syria, and that's the truth of it. They've consolidated in the western part. They've strengthened that regime. They may get rid of Assad at some point if he's a liability and put another leader in.
See, I wondered if they were laying that ground today by saying we're going to have this investigation. Is that about if the investigation proves, as we assume it will, that Assad knew exactly what he was doing? He created those chemical weapons and used them on his people. Does he then become a liability?
Well, Lavrov and Putin created the false narrative that the Syrians didn't do this because they want to protect Assad. And I think if world opinion doesn't shift, it continues to be against them so much, at some point they may get rid of him.
General Jack Keane, thank you so much.
Good talking to you.